But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam Vice President.
You and I both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade, people have become. But listen.
So there's been a lot of talk lately about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris going on the Joe Rogan podcast. And after what we just witnessed in a 28-minute long interview with Bret Baier from Fox News, there is no chance that Kamala Harris can survive a 3-hour-long interview with Joe Rogan. And in case you haven't seen it yet, I wanted to run through some of the highlights of what you might have missed during this Bret Baier interview with Kamala Harris. We're going to go over here to X and have a look at a series of posts, formerly known as tweets, from the Vigilant Fox, right? And he covered this pretty well, he or she, I don't know. And we'll start off with this one, which is just the beginning of the interview, where the conversation quickly went off the rails when Kamala Harris dodged Bret Baier's question on illegal immigration while simultaneously saying, let's get to the point. I mean, completely classless and completely out of touch. But let's go ahead and zoom in and check this part out.
You know, voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration, because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you,
now,
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Bret, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have an
it's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question. I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came.
So somehow Kamala Harris there believed that she was going to answer the question before Bret Baier even got the chance to ask it in full. And I want to remind you, every time you see Donald Trump do one of these interviews with CNN, mostly CNN, MSNBC, some of these just super vile hosts, right? What's her name? I can't think of it right now. I believe her name was Caitlin Collins. And I mean, she was asking Donald Trump questions, and before he could finish answering, she would try to fact check, she would ask the next question, and she would frame it all in a way to which Donald Trump had to basically constantly be on his heels, and if he wasn't as talented and skilled as he is at interviewing, he would completely fall apart. And so Bret Baier gave a milder version of that to Kamala Harris because he's unable to, with her being a woman, be as strong and honestly be as forthcoming and rude, frankly, when it comes to interviewing Kamala Harris. But that's from a Fox News Bret Baier perspective, right? From a lefty Democrat perspective, in my opinion, because if she wants to be president of the United States, she's going to have to deal with people way more difficult than Bret Baier, right? And before we continue, I want to also mention that it's my opinion that Kamala Harris's campaign is sending out the question list ahead of time. Not only do they approve and want the questions ahead of time, I think they're the ones that are actually dictating what they can and cannot answer. And leading into this, Megyn Kelly, who claimed to be a friend of Bret Baier or former coworker or whatever, said that she believes that Fox News was going to go a little bit easy on her because they wanted to make sure that they'll have another opportunity to interview her in the future, either before the election or after she potentially wins, which, pray to God, does not happen, right? But thankfully, Bret Baier did go a little bit harder on her than I believe Megyn Kelly thought that he would. But let's go on to the next one. And this is right after Bret Baier informed Kamala directly to her face that the illegal immigrant who murdered Laken Riley came on her watch and before any bill negotiations were on the table.
Jocelyn Nungari Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday, campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Bret,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that.
We know.
There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Bret.
Madam Vice President, it was a policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungare's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss. Sincerely.
Not only did it take Kamala Harris 30 seconds to say 3 sentences that she then repeated multiple times, she wouldn't even allow Bret Baier to ask the question that he was trying to ask. And so you notice she deflected and mentioned 9 months ago, which 9 months ago, when they tried to pass that border bill that the Democrats love to say that Donald Trump stepped in and blocked or whatever when he's just a citizen campaigning, was way after the deaths of these girls, right? So she's completely out of touch. And once Bret Baier corrected her, she had nothing good to say other than, I'm sorry, right? Well, at least she apologized a little bit. But the fact is, in my opinion, if she was smart enough to deflect, she would have. But you'll notice that she keeps looking over to her left over Bret Baier's right shoulder. And I'm not sure if she's looking at like somebody on her campaign team, or if she's got some kind of like, maybe somebody's typing up some answers for her onto a projector, or, you know, whatever the hell it's called, a teleprompter. I mean, you never know with these people, right? They're all a bunch of fakers. And something to keep in mind is that border bill, from the Democrats' perspective, they wanted to hire more judges. They wanted to put more people in place so they could pass people through the asylum program that they keep putting everybody on. They want to usher more people in, and they wanted to hire more people on the federal dime so that we could fund with our tax dollars the facilitation of illegal immigrants into our country that, like Bret Baier mentioned, they go through the program and then they're released, and then some of these people go on and murder American citizens, like these girls that they just mentioned. But in the next one, Kamala then oddly flips the script from the border is secure to the border has been insecure for a long time, and it started with Trump. And now here is when the Democrat go-to begins, right? And that is always deflecting to the boogeyman Donald Trump, because once again, like I've said a million times on this channel already, Democrats can't win on good policies. They always have to try to make you hate and fear their opponent, and so therefore you go and vote for them out of fear that their opponent would be worse, right? And in this case, it's Donald Trump, the ultimate boogeyman and threat to the Democratic Party and the deep state swamp that has been ingrained in our federal government for decades.
During that time, you said repeatedly that the border was secure. When in your mind did it start becoming a crisis?
I think we've had a broken immigration system transcending, by the way, Donald Trump's administration even before. Let's all be honest about that. I have no pride in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed. We need more. I was just down at the border talking with border agents, and they will tell you, and I'm sure you probably, I know you investigate and you are a serious journalist. They will tell you, we need more judges. We need to process those cases faster. We need the support for those cases that should be prosecuted. They need more resources, and Congress ultimately is the only place that's going to get fixed, Bret. Well, that's how this system works.
That's the premise of this question.
But
there were
that's how the
90-plus executive orders that were rescinded in the first days. Many of those were Trump border policies. I'm not going to stay here because there's other things to talk about, but you frequently talk to the Border Patrol Union for support of that bipartisan bill, and they did. They supported it. But they also just endorsed Donald Trump and said, you've been, quote, a failure with border security.
And so you see there, she just admitted that they wanted to put more people on, as judges and stuff like that to facilitate the illegal immigrants into our country and put them on asylum, let them get work visas, all this stuff, right? And when she claims that the Border Patrol supported the bill, I think that's only because they were following orders, and the orders were to facilitate these people in, and their basically perspective was that, well, in order for us to do it the way that you want us to do it, we're going to need more judges, we're going to need more, this or that. And so it's not necessarily that they supported the illegal immigration into the country, is that they supported the funding and the extra help, just like anybody would when they're buried in work, right? And they're depending on the government to fix things for them. And the government at the same time is basically telling them, dictating to them the job that they're supposed to do, and that's who they work for. The border security worked for the federal government, and the federal government is saying, no, this is how we're doing it. So, I mean, you guys get it, right? And so next, Bret Baier plays a video. It's actually an ad that exposed Kamala Harris's support for taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners, right? I mean, get out of here. They just think that we have so much money, that we're just, the American people are this never-ending piggy bank. And then they love to have this excuse that, the billionaires are the ones that aren't paying their fair share, and they're the ones that we're going to tax even heavier. Yeah, right. We all know how the trickle-down effect, and the billionaires own all the companies that we buy products from, products that we consume on a daily basis, and it's all going to come back to us. So it's a completely horrible policy that can't work, won't work, and should never be implemented. The billionaires, the richest of us, already pay 90% of the taxes as it is. So I don't know what your perspective of fair share is, but to me, I think they pay their fair share, maybe even a little bit extra, but it is what it is at this point. But I don't believe that making them pay more is a good plan, and it definitely shouldn't earn support votes from anybody that works with these companies or any of these individuals themselves.
This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides say that he never advocated for that prison policy, and no gender transition surgeries
you know what, you got to take responsible for what happened
presidency.
In your administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in this presidency.
It's in black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassignment surgeries?
I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think he spent $20 million on those ads, trying to create a sense of fear in the voters because he actually has no plan in this election that is about focusing on the needs of the American people. Whereas, at $20 million on that ad, on an issue that, as it relates to the biggest issues that affect the American people, it's really quite remote.
Holy crap. The Trump derangement syndrome and the word salad are beyond reproach, right? And I noticed two things in that little segment. First of all, she said that Donald Trump needs to be held responsible for the things that happened during his administration, but yet she won't cop to any of the things that happened during her own administration. And you can't say that this was Biden's administration and not hers. She was given the opportunity, and forgive me for being a broken record, but I think this is an important thing that people need to understand. Just the other day on The View, when she was asked what she would do differently than Joe Biden, she said nothing. She completely co-signed to every decision that Joe Biden made, even making her the border czar. I mean, she should have at least said, I wish he wouldn't have said that I was the border czar, because then she could at least be off the hook for that somewhat, right? But no, she completely co-signed to everything that Joe Biden did. And so now when Bret Baier asks her about the failing border policies and the fact that they went in and completely overrid and got rid of all of Trump's border policies to stay in Mexico, all the presidential executive orders, everything that amounted to, the worst type of crimes happening to innocent American citizens, she won't cop to. Even though she says Trump needs to be held accountable for what happened during his administration. The second thing that I noticed during this clip, and maybe it was because she might have pushed her hair back over her ear, but she is wearing the same earrings that were in question that she was wearing during the debate against Donald Trump. The thing is, these earrings are either $800 earrings or they're Bluetooth devices. Either way, she constantly is putting it in your face, in my face, in Americans' face, that she is way richer than us, because most people aren't wearing $800 earrings. And if they're not the $800 earrings, then those things are Bluetooths, and she's being talked to in her ear via those earrings. And I think the odds of her wearing those earrings during two very pertinent debates, one against Donald Trump and one here in this interview with Bret Baier, that's not like ironic, right? It's intentional. In my opinion, I believe those are probably the Bluetooth ones. But regardless, like I said, she's completely out of touch. And ironically, she says she's going to follow the laws when it comes to transgender surgeries being funded by the federal government in prison for prisoners, which is crazy. My tax dollars should certainly not be paying for that, considering we have way bigger issues with more important people who aren't in prison, like our homeless veterans. I'll just leave it at that. Our homeless veterans, they should always take precedent over a sex change for a criminal, okay? But she didn't cop to it. But yet at the same time, her and the Biden administration wouldn't follow the laws when it comes to protecting our borders. Go figure, right? I mean, it's very convenient to say, oh, Donald Trump should be held accountable for what happens during his administration, but then they won't even follow the laws and be held accountable for the things that happened during her administration that amounted to way worse things, right? And so, she's just going to lie, say whatever she thinks that she has to say to convince the American people that she's the better candidate. And ultimately, she, like I said a minute ago, is going to try to deflect to Donald Trump. We have a couple more segments here, so let's go ahead and check out the next one.
My plans for our economy would strengthen our economy. His would make them weaker.
Why do you
would
think more
ignite
people
inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. Those are the facts.
Why do you think more people say they trust him on the economy than they trust you?
I think that when you look at an analysis of our plans for what we would do as President of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works that moving forward, because I do believe the American people are ready to turn the page on the divisiveness and the type of rhetoric that has come out of Donald Trump. People are ready to chart a new way forward, and they want a president who has a plan for the future and a plan that is sound and will strengthen our country. My plan for the economy does exactly that. His plan would be, again, to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our deficit. My plans for...
Well, at least she's right about that. Americans do want a strong president with a plan that's going to benefit the economy and everyday Americans. But her plan, which she fails to mention what it is, besides, like I said, taxing the billionaires and blaming Donald Trump that he's going to give tax cuts to the billionaires and the richest in the country, which worked last time, and it actually put more money in all of our bank accounts. Put money in all of our bank accounts. We are all living with less debt. We're able to purchase houses with lower interest rates, cars with lower interest rates. The economy was growing at an astronomical rate. The stock markets were doing fine, which, you know, the stock market thing is kind of weird, right? I don't know if the president has a whole lot to do with that, and I'm not a stock dude, you know. I might have tried it and failed, but so at least she's honest about that part. But the fact remains that Donald Trump is the one that's better suited, more equipped, and with a better track record than she is in getting these things done. But this next segment is where things go from bad to worse, because Kamala still can't come up with a single thing that she would do differently than Joe Biden. Let's check it out.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of... Yes. But also, I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days.
Gotta love how she inserted a couple of the talking points that we've been hearing up to this point. I think she actually just quoted Joe Biden that she is the new wave, right? The next generation of leadership or whatever that was. It's a bunch of nonsense, right? Her running mate, Tim Walz, just claimed that he's getting too old to shoot a shotgun because it hurts his shoulder. I mean, that's not a new age. That's not handing it over to the youth. And frankly, if you're going to hand it over to the youth, hand it over to Gen X. Don't hand it over to Kamala Harris, who is going to use her life experiences of basically sleeping her way to the top and always failing upwards to implement policies that are going to cost taxpayers more money. Now, I don't know, that small business thing might benefit me with the small business little YouTube thing that I have going here, but I believe what Donald Trump has for us is going to be even better. So I'm not going to be like these Democrats like they always do. I remember back when Obama was running, everybody thought they were going to get free health care. It was all over Facebook, and it was pathetic. Everybody thought, well, I'm going to get free health care. A bunch of pieces of shit thinking that they're just going to take from the government and cost me, this hardworking kid, more taxes. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not trying to do that to the young people right now. The young people already bear a big enough burden as it is, just trying to start a family, just trying to buy a house, things like that when it comes to today's economy that, unfortunately for Kamala Harris, her administration set forth. So I have 3 more segments that I'm just going to play back to back to back for you guys, and then I'll give my closing thoughts.
Rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, That track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam Vice
You and I both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade, people have become, but listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president. One, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him instead of the American people. People are tired of that.
If that's the case, why is half the country supporting him? Why is he beating you in a lot of swing states? Why, if he's as bad as you say, that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States? Why is that happening?
This is an election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy.
I know, but
it's not supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a cakewalk for anyone.
So are they misguided, the 50%?
Listen,
are they stupid? What is it?
I would never say that about the American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that.
I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
He didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes. Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump...
The significance of that.
You call Donald Trump... he's misguided. You say now
he's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this.
He's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again, including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact. That is a fact.
Is that a fact? Okay, two things. I actually lied to you. I have one more clip to play after this, but I had to cut in and say these two things really quick. First of all, Donald Trump never threatened to use the American military against American citizens. She's insane. And, you know, what's funny is it's the Democrats who actually were suggesting that Donald Trump use the military, the National Guard, to go in, play a dictator's role, and remove the people from the Chaz chop. So the Democrats actually call for Donald Trump to be a dictator because they believe in, you know, the federal government having that type of power where Donald Trump likes to leave things to the states and resisted. Okay. So now the second thing is, Kamala Harris is not a doctor. She is not qualified to make a diagnosis, to give a diagnosis of Donald Trump's mental stability and all the things that she just basically claimed, especially when she was not smart enough to figure out the thing that we knew 4 years ago before Joe Biden was elected, that he was not mentally stable enough to do the job. Look at him. Look at how bad he got destroyed by Donald Trump in that one debate that they did that ended his election bid. He had to bow out after being forced by Nancy Pelosi and Obama and everything like that. But it was because he did so bad. If he would have done great in that debate, they wouldn't have had the leverage on him. But instead, he failed. And that's how Kamala Harris, who loves to say that Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy, right, even though we're a constitutional republic, was just completely inserted, ignoring 14 million votes for Joe Biden in the Democratic primaries this year. And she was able to make a few phone calls over the weekend and basically secure all the delegate votes to move forward and be the candidate without the approval of any American citizen besides the DNC, right? Nobody from the public, at least, I'll say. And she still has not earned one vote from anybody to be a representative in that position. Even when you include her bid that she was running against Joe Biden in 2020. It's insane. But like I said, I lied before. I have one more clip that I'm going to play for you guys. And this is basically when Kamala Harris's team has had enough and they cut the interview off and basically drag her off the stage.
I hope you got to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump. There are a lot of things
There's more to say. I have much more to say,
there are a lot of things that people want to learn about you and your policies,
yes.
And that's why I
invite everyone to go to KamalaHarris.com, and you will see that I have 80 pages of policies that are quite comprehensive and should be accessible to anyone who would like to read them. And it includes what I intend to do about affordable housing, what I intend to do about small businesses, what I do
and that's why we
to
invited you here
our economy,
to see where you were in 2019 and where you are now.
America's military and ensure we have the most lethal and best fighting force in the world.
Madam Vice President,
and
they're giving me a hard rap here.
Well, I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
It's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rather than say it was good to meet you too, he just said thank you very much because he's pretty much been disrespected this entire interview. And look at how happy she is. Let's go back and look at her smile on her face. She is so relieved. That is the biggest smile she had this entire interview, and it's because the interview is over. I mean, it's just such a pathetic interview. She got completely demolished. There's people out there already saying that this ended her campaign. Next, the Democrats are going to try to replace her with somebody else. And I'm all for it. You know what? Put somebody else in there. I don't know. Maybe not. A new, fresh face might actually be bad for Donald Trump just because there's people out there looking to vote for the D. They love the D and they can't wait to go and vote for anybody with a D next to their name. And so I don't know. Maybe they're going to vote for Kamala anyways. But regardless, this last part was fantastic because Bret Baier was saying, look, I hope you said everything you need to say about Donald Trump sarcastically. And of course, immediately she starts talking about how she could go on for days and days about how bad Donald Trump was. But that was just part of what he was saying. When he tried to pick it up, 30 seconds later, 15 seconds later, she still kept rambling. But he was trying to say, this interview was an opportunity that we were giving you to explain to the American people the differences from what you've said on camera within the last few years versus what you're saying today and why. Because she's constantly saying today that she is not the same person that she was just a few years ago. And to me, that's her just pandering and lying because, I mean, look, she's on camera saying a bunch of stuff that is completely ridiculous, that people that are, hardworking taxpayers struggling to live week to week don't support. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, Green Party, whatever it is, right? You don't support the stuff that she ran on. And so now she's pulling the old switcheroo lie to you story and trying to, like I said multiple times, basically blame Donald Trump and make him the boogeyman. And it just wasn't working. And so her team was like, wrap it up. This has got to end right here. They're probably yelling in her Bluetooth earrings, shut up, shut up. I mean, seriously, what a complete disaster. I'm glad this interview happened. I'm glad it happened when it did, because we're getting close to the election. We're less than 3 weeks out. And the way that, people tend to kind of move on with the news cycle, this one has the potential to stick around all the way through the election, just given that it's so close to the election date. And so with that, I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video all the way to the end. If you have, make sure that you're hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel. We're America First around here, pretty much as far as everything goes. And if you are too, you're in the right place. So like I said, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this video if you enjoyed it. And I also want to thank the Vigilant Fox on X for putting together that series of videos and descriptions in a way that we could break it down piece by piece. And so go check them out over there at X. Like I said, they are called, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl. So here they are over on X. Make sure you give them a follow. They do a lot of good work over there. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video.